Part 8. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 71. Although this is a relatively safe area, we still have to remain vigilant. Suddenly, Kaylan froze in place. The words vigilance and vigilance were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. Less than 2 meters directly in front of him, a huge eye was staring at him, with a dim dark green light emitting from the pupil, which was as big as the wheel hub of a heavy truck. Gudong. Kaylan swallowed with some difficulty. His finger was already on the trigger of the Shark Hunter machine gun, but he knew very well that for a creature of this size, the weapon in his hand would be very difficult. It is difficult to cause any substantial damage. Liao Zilang, run away, I'll find a way to hold this thing down, Kaylan said in a very low voice. There was silence in the darkness, and even the green eye remained motionless. Liao Zilang. There was no answer. Liao Zilang, who was originally sticking behind him, had disappeared. Damn. Kaylan gritted his teeth. He believed that Liao Zilang would never escape alone without saying a word. This situation can only mean one thing: Liao Zilang might have encountered something before him. He had lost the ability to issue warnings before he noticed something strange. Staring at his giant eyes without making any movement, Kaylan felt that the black water around him seemed to become more and more viscous, as if he had fallen into a swamp, with thick peat wrapping around his torso and limbs, dragging him along. He sank into the abyss little by little. It seemed as if a hand was squeezing his throat, and the pain of suffocation kept coming up. Kaylan wanted to struggle, but his hands and feet refused to obey him at all. Some weird hallucination fragments flashed in front of his eyes. Then, vaguely, he seemed to see the pyramid-shaped altar under the glacier, a huge sarcophagus, broken stone tablets, and a humanoid monster stained with blood. Wrong. It's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Kaylan suddenly shook, and the feeling of falling and suffocation suddenly disappeared without a trace. However, the huge eye was still there, less than 2 meters away from him. This is... Kaylan got a little closer, and only then did he realize that this huge eye was actually a statue made of rock. The dark green light comes from a piece of luminous mineral embedded in the statue's pupils. The craftsmanship of making this statue is very exquisite. No matter which angle Kaylan looks at it from, the giant eye seems to be staring at him. Even if Kaylan goes around to the back of the statue, there is an identical giant eye there, in the darkness, looking at him faintly. The main body of the statue is a stone pillar as thick as 4 or 5 people can hug it. But what makes Kaylan confused is that the depth here is only 100 meters. If the bottom of this stone pillar is on the seabed, then this stone pillar is too deep. Is it high? Out of curiosity, he fired a flare toward the bottom of the statue. The strong light released by the burning metal suddenly lit up a large area of water, and the ruins of a huge city suddenly appeared directly below Kaylan. How can it be? Kaylan held his breath subconsciously, with a look of extreme horror on his face. This is impossible. The ruins of the underwater city are in the deep sea with a depth of more than 2,800 meters, but now, Kaylan is less than 50 meters away from it. Moreover, the sonar system did not detect any echo. When he thought about sonar, Kaylan realized that the three-dimensional image that originally appeared on the eyepiece had long since disappeared. Except for the thruster, all electronic equipment, including various cameras, recording instruments, and microsonars, had stopped working. The depth gauge completely failed, and the numbers jumped wildly between 0 and several thousand meters. Ever since the stone pillar carved with a giant eye appeared and Liao Zilang disappeared, everything was no longer normal. Could this be the ruins of the undersea city? Could it be that he accidentally passed through a small wormhole or something and was teleported directly here? No, totally wrong. If this is the undersea city, the depth it is now should be between 2,800 meters and 3,000 meters. Logically speaking, this depth is more than twice the limit of the deep diving suit. It is powerful. The water pressure will directly compress the deep diving suit into a thin discus, and the K-LAN inside will also turn into a mixture of plasma, meat paste, and bone fragments. But now, apart from the electronic equipment, there was no problem with the deep diving suit itself, and K-LAN didn't feel any discomfort. This is definitely not an undersea city, at least not the one located in the deep sea. Recently, my writing speed has become slower and slower, because it involves a lot of knowledge that I have never been exposed to before. Basically, every time I write a paragraph, I need to consult a large amount of information, which includes text, images, videos, etc., which takes more time and energy than there are countless times more ways to write. Take it for granted. At the same time, we will also find many bugs and technical problems in the previous article. For example, the main reason for the difficulty of underwater communication is that electromagnetic waves in water will be severely attenuated, and radiation is not the main reason. For example, the acoustic communication that I ignored before, I still have to do it without making any major progress. When making changes, it will take a lot of effort to get rid of these bugs. Although in the final analysis this is just a soft science fiction article, on the Kidian Science Fiction channel, which is full of fantasy and fantasy articles, I still want to write a more hardcore article, at least not making too many common sense mistakes. I'm not afraid of the unskilled bully. I'm afraid that the knowledgeable boss will really see the problem, which will expose the author's lack of talent and knowledge, making him an embarrassing group. So please forgive me for the slow writing during this period. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 72. Moreover, according to previous information, the ruins of the undersea city were originally built on a small island. Later, the island sank to the bottom of the sea for some unknown reason, and the city of Alpha civilization was brought down with it. But the city in front of you is obviously not built on land. The urban architectural style of the Alpha people is dominated by towering polygonal towers. The towers are connected to each other to form a complete urban network, no matter how stable the structure and the strength of the materials used in these towers are. It is impossible for these buildings to withstand the huge pressure 2,000 meters underwater. Unless every gap in the city can be filled with seawater during the sinking process, the buildings in the entire city will be destroyed. It was badly damaged by water pressure. But what K-LAN saw was a relatively complete undersea city. He couldn't even use words like ruin or wreck to describe it, because most of its buildings were extremely complete and almost no trace of it could be found. No trace of damage. Of course, based on this alone, K-LAN would not draw that conclusion. Alpha City's most iconic tower does not exist in this underwater city at all. Everything he can see is hemispherical. The bunker-like building looks like giant bowls of different sizes resting on the seabed. These buildings were designed in this shape from the beginning to withstand the huge water pressure from the outside world. This is not a land city that sunk into the sea at all, it was originally built underwater. But the question that bothers K-LAN the most now is not this, but, where is he? This is definitely not the relatively safe area planned before launching into the water. If there is such an underwater city at a depth of 100 meters, even the microsonar carried by K-LAN himself can scan it out, let alone the Pioneer. That big thing is dozens of times more powerful than a microsonar. However, this is definitely not the bottom of the sea. This sea area is hundreds of nautical miles away from the coast, and the shallowest place is thousands of meters deep. If it were at that depth, K-LAN should feel very difficult to breathe at this moment. His eyes, and due to excessive congestion in the ears, symptoms such as cloudy vision and hearing loss may also occur, and it is even possible to faint directly. But he doesn't feel any discomfort now, which means that this place is definitely not too deep. Well, this city should be built on the sea platform, but I don't know where the boundary of the sea platform is. The sea platform, also known as the submarine plateau, is an underwater highland with a flat top. If the depth here is within 300 meters, then this sea platform is estimated to be 1,000 meters above the seabed. Domi, it is impossible for such a behemoth to escape human detection. It's really evil. Kaylan couldn't help but say the old dog's mantra. All the electronic equipment Kaylan carried on his body had stopped working, and no one was spared. Not only that, but even purely mechanical devices such as the pressure gauge and underwater density meter had malfunctioned. Otherwise, the devices that rely on water pressure and water density would have failed. Using the data, he could more or less calculate the approximate depth of his location. After taking a look at the underwater city just around the corner, Kaylan still gave up the idea of exploring. At this time, he chose to float up. Maybe there would be a chance to escape from this strange water. But at this moment, a dark shadow suddenly swayed below, flashing into the blind spot of the building where the light of the flare could not reach. It seems like a figure. Ian's heartbeat couldn't help but skip a beat. Could it be Liao Zilang? Kaylan didn't notice at all when he disappeared, but if that black shadow was him, then why was he there? If that black shadow is him, is he still alive? Ever since Kaylan saw the giant eye, the entire test dive operation had completely deviated from the original plan and gradually slipped into an unpredictable abyss. Forget it, it's a blessing not a curse, it's a curse. If it's a curse, your mother. Kaylan gritted his teeth, picked up the Shark Hunter machine gun in his hand, turned on the safety, and pointed not far away toward the ruins of the city. Due to the limited range of the flares, they can only light up part of the area. Most of this underwater city is still hidden in darkness, so Kaylan can't judge how big it is. In short, wherever he can see, everything is everywhere. They are all hemispherical buildings. The smallest diameter of these buildings is about 5 to 6 meters, and the largest is more than 100 meters. The surface of the building is covered with a thick layer of algae. It is difficult to see the original material of the building, and it is impossible to judge the function of these buildings. Use. Finally, Ian's feet stepped on the top of a medium-sized hemispherical building, but before he could stand firm, the algae under his feet suddenly launched an attack, and several tough seaweeds instantly wrapped around his ankles. Drag him down. Is this thing so aggressive? 4 pairs of hooks popped out from the front and rear ends of the boots and were nailed to the roof. At the same time, the propellers on the feet were pushed out, and the sharp blades instantly shattered the entangled seaweed. More seaweed came up one after another, and the propellers simply turned into a lawnmower. For a while, the algae leaf fragments were floating around, until all the algae on the roof were harvested. This lawnmower, the machine just stopped. Kaylan noticed that what attacked him was a kind of black algae that looked like kelp. After being cut, it would emit a large amount of ink black sap. This ink black sap would react violently when it comes into contact with the surface of the deep diving suit, producing a large number of bubbles simultaneously burned out dark marks on the surface of the deep diving suit. This inky black sap appears to be extremely corrosive. Kaylan retracted his claws, stepped lightly, and floated again. Although these algae did not pose a threat to him, those corrosive juices were very troublesome. If the deep diving suit was damaged, it would probably not be possible. Failed to return to the Pioneer alive. He adjusted the output of the thruster to the smallest setting and slowly floated forward. The place where the black shadow just appeared was not far ahead. If the largest hemispherical building was used as a marker, it would be accurate. The location should be 50 to 80 meters behind and to the left of the landmark building. Laugh. Another flare was ignited directly above the landmark building, and a large area that was originally in shadow was illuminated by strong light, but Kaylan, who was standing high, found no trace of the black figure. Did I see it wrong? Just when he hesitated, the black shadow flashed across his field of vision again. This time further ahead, the black shadow seemed to be trying hard to escape from the illuminated area. Kaylan saw clearly this time, it was a human-shaped black shadow. There is a head on the shoulders, and the torso is connected to the legs and arms. The body size is basically consistent with that of a human. But at the ends of the Black Shadow's limbs, there are several long and thin unknown objects extending out. That can't be tentacles, right? The image of the erosion seed suddenly popped into Ian's mind. That kind of monster can even survive in a vacuum for a period of time, so the high pressure of the deep sea should be too strong for it. It's not a big problem. If it was really that kind of monster, would we still chase it? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 73. Want to chase? If the humanoid shadow was Liao Zilang, why did he escape from the area lit by the flare? And those slender black tentacles, those tentacles. Lan knew very well that if that figure was Liao Zilang, there would be almost no possibility of survival, it might just be a body. As for what occupies this body. Click. With the bullet loaded, Lan plunged into the waters swallowed by darkness. Seed of Erosion has strong physical resistance to blows, as well as the ability to regenerate. This is unknown information from the depths of memory, but what happened before has proven the accuracy of this information. This is from regarding the internal intelligence of Alpha civilization. Although Lan did not know why they appeared in his head, there was something mentioned in this information. Seeds of Erosion are not invincible. This is a creature with extremely tenacious vitality, but no matter how tenacious it is still just a creature. The Shark Hunter machine gun in Ian's hand is equipped with 150 rounds of powerful explosive bombs, and there is another one in the backpack of the deep diving suit. There are 1,200 rounds of prepared ammunition. In addition, 2 depleted uranium warhead torpedoes are hung on both sides of the backpack, as well as 36 special incendiary bombs. The firepower of the weapons he carries is no less than that of a heavy combat mecha. No matter how strong the regeneration ability of the Seed of Corrosion is, as long as it is blasted into pieces and then burned completely, Lan does not believe that it can be reborn from a pile of ashes. This is just a bunch of disgusting tentacles, not something like Phoenix that only exists in human mythology. 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. Lan gradually went deep into the shadow area, and the visibility of the surrounding environment was declining sharply. With both the low-light night vision device and the infrared night vision device malfunctioning, he was almost groping forward in the darkness, taking every step he took. Every step must be taken with caution. Unspeakable fear was growing crazily, and Ian's breathing gradually became rapid. Every time he exhaled, a thin layer of white mist would form on the glass mask, and then quickly disappear. An inhuman creature with the ability to cause instant death is dormant in an unknown dark corner at the moment. Every step Lan takes is getting closer to the trap set by that thing. The opponent is a predator, and I am the prey. This feeling is enough to drive people crazy. If it were any other person with poor mental endurance, I am afraid that he would have thrown away his weapon and ran away. With every step he took, he felt that he was getting closer and closer to death. In the darkness, there seemed to be something peeping at him from all directions. They were approaching quietly, waiting for an opportunity to move. The attack that could come at any time forced Lan to tense up his nerves all the time. The finger holding the trigger had become extremely sore and swollen, and the muscles all over his body had gradually become stiff due to the long-term tension. Each step he took was heavier than the previous one, and his advancement became slower and slower. No, if this continues, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on even before I encounter that thing. Lan stopped and closed his eyes. That thing has the ability to easily kill itself, but it is also armed to the teeth. It is its prey, and it is also its prey. The reason why he stepped into this place with a machine gun was to hunt the opponent. Being in the dark is a huge disadvantage for you, and if you fire a flare, the thing will escape into the shadows again. The only way is to turn yourself into a light source, making it inevitable for the opponent to avoid it. This is taboo in the rules of underwater diving, but in this case, it is Ian's only choice. Bang! Two high-lumen searchlights mounted on both sides of the helmet were turned on instantly, illuminating the area directly in front of Lan. At this moment, two extremely long black tentacles pierced out from the shadow on the left side and headed straight for Lan. Here comes the facade. I knew it. Lan opened his eyes suddenly. The propellers on his right shoulder and right elbow rotated wildly. The compressed air spurted out from the small holes. The strong reaction force immediately pushed Lan 1 meter to the left. The distance caused his body to twist nearly 45 degrees to the left while avoiding the tentacle attack. Puff 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 puff. The sound of underwater machine gun fire was dull and unclear. The arrow-shaped explosive shells mixed with nano-alloy directly shredded the two tentacles that attacked Lan, and incidentally shattered a low wall at the left alley, and that the black figure that Lan had chased all the way was finally exposed to his sight, and he could see it clearly. That is indeed a human being, or rather, he was a human being during his lifetime. But not Liao Zilang. Nor was it parasitized by the seeds of erosion. He was wearing an orange deep diving suit, with a large amount of black seaweed wrapped around his limbs. The tentacles that just attacked Lan were actually part of these seaweeds. It turns out to be seaweed. Lan released the trigger, swam to the body, chopped up the remaining seaweed with the propeller blades, and then turned the body over with its back facing him. What appeared in front of Ian's eyes was a very terrifying face. It had no eyeballs, and only two dark holes were left in the eye sockets. Large areas of the blue-gray skin on the face collapsed, sticking tightly to the bones. Above, the flesh and blood under the skin has been completely drained, and the withered lips are turned outward, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. This is a mummy. Moreover, there was a large hole torn open in the abdomen of the corpse and the abdomen of the deep diving suit. Flesh-eating worms. Lan held the corpse's arm tightly, his heart beating wildly. The corpse looked exactly like the dead priestess. Whether it was the scene in the video or the dictation from others, Lan had been guessing before, but now, when he saw the corpse with his own eyes, he was 100% sure that it was definitely parasitized by flesh-eating worms. A wonderful host. Really? Judging from the logo on the chest of the deep diving suit, the deceased's name was Bren, and he was an elite agent of the Security Bureau. He should be one of the missing persons during the previous underwater exploration operations. The flesh and blood on the corpse had been almost completely sucked dry, and the flesh-eating worms parasitic in his body had burst out of his body and disappeared, but since the second one appeared, there must be a third and fourth one. This trip was not in vain. As long as they could capture a flesh-eating worm, no, they didn't even need to capture a complete living body, they only needed to get a part of the body tissue of the flesh-eating worm to neutralize Ivan's body. Seeds of erosion invade alienated cells. Lan suddenly felt that the goal of their trip seemed to be very close at hand. After tying the body to his back with a rope, Lan decided to move forward. If it were just those black seaweeds, although this underwater city would be very strange, it would actually not be dangerous. He had a hunch that if he missed this opportunity, he might never find this ruins again next time. After walking forward for almost half a kilometer and passing through dense buildings, an abyss-like crack suddenly appeared in front of him. This fissure is 300 meters long, nearly 10 meters wide at its widest point, and bottomless. There is a fence more than 3 meters high around the fissure. The top of the fence is covered with a huge metal mesh, which connects the entire crack. The cracks have been sealed, but the metal mesh is full of torn holes and has lost its original function. There is a stone tablet standing next to the fence, with a string of Alpha Civilization words written on it. Incubation, incubation, field. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen Mi San. Chapter 74. Hatchery. Is it a hatchery for flesh-eating worms? But don't flesh-eating worms hatch inside their hosts? This is a hatchery. Could it be used to raise meat animals as hosts? However, the metal mesh used to seal the abyss is full of holes. It's hard to tell what might be underneath. It's just that after the hatchery was abandoned for such a long time, there are still living flesh-eating worms, which really makes Kaylan a little strange. He once killed a flesh-eating worm with his own hands. Compared to the corrosion seed, this kind of fat worm has an extremely fragile body and is absolutely impossible to survive in such an extreme environment. It would be great if we could know where the worm in this guy's stomach went. Kaylan glanced at the body carried behind him, feeling a little regretful in his heart. I hope I can find something in this hatchery. Kaylan swam directly above the metal mesh and fired the last flare into the abyss. The flare fell quickly, and after a few seconds, it burst out with a strong light, dragging a long trajectory in the abyss like a meteor. This is too deep. Kaylan looked around and saw that the flare had been falling for more than 10 seconds, but it still had not hit the bottom. The depth of the part that could be observed now alone was already more than 200 meters. The rock walls on both sides of the abyss are very smooth, and the surface seems to have been specially treated, with a unique reflection of metal materials. The further you go down, the farther the distance between the rock walls. The overall shape of the abyss is like the girth is like a purse, and although the slit above is very narrow, the space underneath is unimaginably large. Just when Kaylan decided to pass through the metal mesh and enter the abyss, the incendiary bomb that he shot down suddenly went out. This made him suddenly alert. This kind of underwater flare can burn for 3 to 5 minutes in an oxygen-free environment, and will not go out even if it is hit by a violent collision or strong water flow, but it is less than a minute now. It suddenly went out, which is definitely not normal. Rather than saying it goes out, it would be more appropriate to describe it as disappearing. It was as if something hidden in the darkness suddenly swallowed the entire flare in one gulp. If you choose to dive rashly, I'm afraid you will disappear suddenly like this flare. That was the last flare on Ian's body just now. Apart from the flare, the only remaining lighting equipment was the 2 searchlights mounted on both sides of the helmet. No. He has more than 2 searchlights in his hands. Kaylan looked at the body of the Security Bureau agent. Although the deep diving suit the other party wore was different from his own, it still had standard equipment such as a searchlight. Putting the body down, Kaylan turned on the searchlight switch, and 2 snow-white light beams suddenly shot out from the lamp tube. Although the remaining battery capacity could not be seen, judging from the intensity of the light, it should still be usable. It lasted for a while. I'm sorry. I originally wanted to bring you back to the ship, but in this situation, I can only borrow your body. Kaylan apologized to the body, and then pushed it into the abyss. The mummy wrapped in the damaged deep diving suit sank slowly. Kaylan stared at the bottom of the abyss. The disappearance of the flare only took a moment, and the size of this corpse was much larger than the flare. What he swallowed may not be able to swallow such a corpse wearing a deep diving suit. In addition, he also hung several special incendiary bombs and a piece of plastic explosive on the body. The explosive used a trigger fuse. When it is squeezed and collided by external forces other than water pressure, it will explode directly, and detonate the incendiary bombs together. Whatever was at the bottom of the abyss, it was enough to drink a pot. I checked my equipment one last time. Kaylan himself also jumped into the abyss, keeping a relatively safe distance of about 50 meters between him and the corpse. In this way, even if the corpse below encountered something, he would have enough time to escape and surface. The body was still sinking, and the depth reached this time had exceeded the incendiary bomb just now. It was precisely because of this that Kaylan was able to see something that he had not seen before. At a depth of about 300 meters, the rock walls on both sides are no longer as smooth as the upper part. With the extremely penetrating light, a pale flesh film can be vaguely seen covering the rock. Above, This layer looks like rotten meat that has been soaked in water for a long time, with large swathes of cotton-like objects growing on the swollen surface. These flocks seem to be extremely sensitive to light. When the searchlight beam swept over them, they actually shrank into a ball. This scene reminded Kaylan of what he saw in the Ark Botanical Museum when he was a child. Mimosa, that strange plant whose leaves shrink and close immediately after being touched by external force, is very similar to the current situation. This thing should be a kind of creature, right? Regarding these deep-sea creatures on planet Alpha, humans have very little information. The deep-sea giant eel is already a relatively common deep-sea species, but even so, there are still a lot of mysteries about living things, not to mention things that have never been seen before. I just don't know if these things are an individual, or a group, huh? Just as Kaylan was thinking, that strange feeling that he had not seen for a long time suddenly appeared again. A large number of information fragments emerged from the depths of his memory, gradually becoming blurry and becoming clear, one after another in his mind like a slideshow. Flash by. This thing is actually the eggshell of a flesh-eating worm. In this way, this hatchery is indeed a hatchery for flesh-eating worms. I just don't know what the purpose of the Alpha people is to cultivate this kind of flesh-eating worms. Is it used as food or medicine? Or does it have other uses? There was a lot of new knowledge in his head, and it was all related to the eggshells of flesh-eating worms. But what made Kaylan a little speechless was that there was not even a word in it that mentioned the abyss at the bottom of the sea, or even the hatchery. The word never appears. Completely contrary to this, one of the messages actually mentioned that flesh-eating worms are difficult to cultivate in a centralized manner, and the larvae will eat each other. For them, the flesh and blood of the same kind is far more attractive than the heterogeneous host. It is difficult to concentrate on cultivating, no wonder there is no mention of hatcheries, but if it cannot be centralized on cultivating, then what is going on in this abyss? Isn't this inconsistent? Wait, something seems wrong. The larvae and the larvae eat each other. Kaylan repeated the sentence, and was suddenly shocked. A somewhat bold hypothesis appeared in his mind. Could this hatchery be used to raise goo? Let hundreds of larvae fight and devour each other, and finally get the most powerful goo king. Just thinking about it is enough to make one's scalp numb. The corpse had sunk to a depth of 500 meters. Wherever the light touched, there were layers of white eggshells, but except for the eggshells, there was nothing else. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 75. According to the known information, the composition of the eggshell is very different from the body of the flesh-eating worm. This is actually a culture medium created by the Alpha aliens, specially used to provide protection and early stage for the larvae of the flesh-eating worm. After the flesh-eating worm larvae enter the second stage, they will be removed from the eggshell and implanted into the host called a meat animal. There are a large number of broken cysts distributed on these membranous egg cases. Each cyst means that there once was a larvae of flesh-eating worms. Estimating from the density of cysts and the area of the egg cases, only this area is only 100 meters deep, and there must be more than 100,000 flesh-eating worms. The scale of this hatchery is really amazing. Kaylan hung the machine gun on his waist and controlled the thruster to approach the rock wall. The photosensitive white flocks on the eggshell are actually a very special kind of algae. They can separate and filter various organic substances from seawater, store them in the body, and then convert them into nutrients to supply the eggshell. Flesh-eating worm larvae. If the larvae of flesh-eating worms will leave the eggshell after entering the second stage, where will they be sent? Is it somewhere else, or deeper in this hatchery? Kaylan had already dived 700 meters below the abyss. The reaction caused by the high pressure gradually began to show up on him. He could clearly feel the terrifying force coming from the outside of the deep diving suit, which was constantly squeezing his body. Every time he inhales, his body, especially his lungs, becomes extremely difficult. His lungs seem to have become a balloon flattened by a heavy object, Trying to force the balloon to push the weight on top. Hold it up unless there is pressure inside the balloon to compete with it. I hope the injection system doesn't malfunction. Kaylan did not hesitate and directly turned on a red switch on the inside of his wrist. In an instant, two thick needles protruded from the inside of the deep diving suit and pierced Ian's forearm. The feeling of the high-pressure injectable supercharger entering the body cannot be said to be comfortable. It can even be described as painful. Kaylan felt that the blood vessels in his body were about to burst in the next second, but just as he was about to reach the collapse at the critical point, as the enhancer took effect, the body's endurance was forcibly increased by a large margin, and this high pressure was forcibly withstood. However, although the potion could strengthen Ian's body, it could not eliminate the pain that almost penetrated into the bone marrow. He couldn't help but regret. If he had known better, he should have mixed a few more pain-killing needles into the mixed potion. Fortunately, this process only lasted about a minute. After the injection of the booster stopped, the pain was greatly reduced, and Kaylan finally became able to breathe freely again. What kind of injection booster? Is clearly a cram-feeding booster. Complaining secretly in his heart, Kaylan once again focused his attention on the abyss below. It is almost 800 meters away, and the bottom of the abyss has still not been observed. How deep is this hatchery? Successful. Finally successful. In this silent darkness, a sudden cheer suddenly sounded, as if a huge boulder had been dropped in the calm lake. Kaylan was suddenly shocked and almost blasted the torpedo in his hand. Got out. Who is it? The 1751st fusion experiment was finally successful, the voice appeared again, with a tone that sounded like madness. Only then did Kaylan realize that the voice did not come from the outside world, but came from the depths of his mind. And, it's the language of Alpha civilization. Is this also something that has been instilled in my memory? In addition to text messages, there are also audio files. After increasing the number of seedlings to 640 million, we finally cultivated individuals that can successfully merge with the seed of corrosion. Thank you to the true God for your guidance. The previous sentence was still praising the true God of Alpha civilization, but the next sentence was suddenly filled with indescribable fear. It's out of control. It's completely out of control. The recording stopped abruptly here. Although there were only a few short sentences, the amount of information contained in it shocked Kaylan greatly. Fusion with the corrosion seed, does that sound refer to the fusion of flesh-eating worms and corrosion seed? Isn't this kind of bug extremely poisonous to the corrosion seed? Kaylan still remembered how the corrosion seed was killed in the exile settlement, but now, this voice actually told him that the Alpha successfully fused the two creatures. The number of 640 million seedlings, could it be referring to this abyss hatchery? Was the 1751st fusion experiment mentioned by that voice completed here? No wonder this recording suddenly appeared in my mind. It must be because I entered this experimental area and met certain triggering conditions that this information was unlocked. It mentions fusions, and the last sentence means, the fusions are out of control. Oops. Kaylan suddenly had an extremely ominous premonition. He activated all the propellers on his body without thinking, trying to escape from the abyss, but at this moment, an irresistible huge suction force came from the bottom of the abyss. Coming over, this suction force was so terrifying that a large vortex composed of seawater undercurrents was directly formed in the abyss. This force grabbed Ian's body and dragged him downward. That fusion is hiding at the bottom of the abyss hatchery. It's too late to escape. In the blink of an eye, the bodies of Kaylan and the Security Bureau agent were swept into the vortex. In the face of such power, any struggle was meaningless. It was as if he was thrown into a giant drum washing machine. I can only let the water flow drive my body to spin crazily. It's over, it's over. I don't know how much time passed, but the undercurrent finally stopped. Kaylan, who was so turned around, struggled to open his eyes. Everything he saw was blood red. The white flesh membranes on the surrounding rock walls have been replaced by dark red bloated flesh. This is the shape of the eggshell when the nutrients have not been exhausted. Countless cysts are slowly squirming through the translucent outer shell. Membrane, you can vaguely see the body curled up in it. But these things are definitely not flesh-eating worms, they are composed of a group of transparent tentacles, and in the center of the group of tentacles, there is a dark core. However, Kaylan had no time to pay attention to these things at the moment. Less than 20 meters directly below him, countless tentacles as thick as a person's arms extended out from the darkness. They had captured the agent's body. A large number of tiny tentacles grew out from the ends of the tentacles, wrapping the entire corpse and the deep diving suit on it into a huge cocoon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 76. Before the giant cocoon was completed, the explosives and incendiary bombs set by Kaylan on the corpse were triggered. A dull explosion sounded underwater. The shock wave instantly tore away the tentacles wrapped around the corpse, and then it burned violently. Metal flame. Those tentacles that came into contact with the flames turned into black charcoal in the blink of an eye, but what made Kaylan feel a little pity was that the flames did not spread to the tentacles themselves. These tiny tentacles are very dangerous to things in the abyss. It's just like human hair. The sudden explosion obviously angered the tentacles, and the front end of one tentacle suddenly cracked open, forming a huge mouth filled with dense teeth. The huge mouth bit the burning corpse in one go. Although it was too far away to hear clearly, Kaylan could definitely imagine the sound. It was made when tens of thousands of teeth and reinforced fiber fabrics rubbed against each other. That kind of heart-wrenching voice made Kaylan feel a thick layer of goosebumps all over his body just thinking about it. 2 seconds, only 2 seconds, the deep diving suit on the body was chopped into pieces. Although this deep diving suit is not as good as the one worn by Kaylan, it is still made of military-grade bulletproof made of fiber. The inner layer is layered with flame-retardant nylon and metal mesh, plus a reinforced skeleton mixed with nano alloy. Even the high-yield explosive set by Kaylan could not destroy it, but after under this huge mouth, it is as fragile as a piece of low-quality toilet paper. Fortunately, what the Pioneer encountered was a deep-sea giant eel. If it were the thing in front of them, Zofia and the others might not even have the chance to send out a distress signal. Most of the bottom of the abyss is still hidden in darkness, but judging from the size of these tentacles, the size of the fusion is definitely no less than a behemoth like the Thunder Beast. Only one of this kind of creature is enough to fight against a full combat fleet. As for ordinary soldiers, they are just like worms shaking a tree. More than 99% of individual weapons cannot penetrate their skin, causing even a little bit of substantial harm. Kaylan has turned off his searchlight. At this moment, the fusion body's attention has been attracted by the exploding corpse. Taking advantage of this opportunity, maybe he can escape from this abyss. Carefully checking the propellers on his body, Kaylan found that exactly half of the 28 sets of propellers had been destroyed in the maelstrom just now, leaving 14 sets. Kaylan tried to restart it, and 9 sets of propellers rotated again. Got up, while the other 5 groups showed no reaction. The exterior looks intact, but the internal motor structure has been damaged. Except for 2 sets of thrusters that are in opposite directions and cannot be adjusted, the maneuverability of the deep diving suit is only reduced to a quarter. In addition, in order not to disturb the fusion body below, Kaylan has to keep the thrusters as stable as possible. In the mute state, the power cannot be fully turned on. The speed at which he is rising is as slow as a snail climbing a tree. Faster, faster. One of the 2 searchlights on the corpse was bitten into pieces, and the other drifted away far away. With this light, Kaylan could still vaguely see the tentacles eating the crushed bones. A full minute passed before Kaylan floated up less than 10 meters. Fortunately, the fusion body didn't seem to notice him. I'm desperate. No creature can leave the hatchery alive except the fusion itself. The record-like voice sounded again. The reason why I can still record here, is because I was treated as a food reserve by the fusion body. Its tentacles penetrated my body, and I couldn't move. These tentacles secrete a toxin, which is eating away at my nerve center. I don't know how long I can hold on. A devotee warrior who had received the priest's blessing broke free. They have genes from the true God in their bodies. The neurotoxins of the fusion body are ineffective against them, but he failed to escape. He was less than 20 years away from the exit. Meters, the fusion's tentacles grabbed him. When his body returned to the lower level of the hatchery, it had turned into a pile of indescribable things. The fusion's IQ was not lower than ours. It could have killed him long ago, but it seemed to prefer to play with it. Pray. They also have the bloodline from the true God, and the fusion body is more powerful than the devotee. It can also evolve. We are not just food, we are also providers of heterogeneous genes. The more species it devours, the stronger it becomes. The experiment did not fail. It was a great success. We are willing to dedicate everything to the true God. It's over, it's finally over. If Alpha language also has the concept of tune, these recordings should all come from the same Alpha star. His identity should be the recorder of this fusion experiment, although Kaylan doesn't know why his records came to him. Memory, but this information is very likely to be true. Then the context of the whole thing is very clear. The Alpha aliens were cultivating a brand new creature in this hatchery, but for some reason, they got away with it, and the thing they cultivated was the fusion at the bottom of the abyss. Body, out of control, it killed all the alphas in the hatchery and turned them into its own food. But what made Kaylan a little uneasy was that the recorder mentioned that the fusion body had the habit of playing with its prey. Could that be? He didn't dare to continue imagining it. The last bright searchlight was extinguished, and the abyss returned to boundless darkness and silence. Among these records, there is very little information related to the fusion body. It can be seen that even the Alpha aliens have not been able to tame the monster they created. So, can humans be able to kill it? The propeller blades kept turning, leading Kaylan to rise slowly. He put his arms in front of his chest and remained motionless, just like a rotten tree trunk sinking into the sea. He wanted to pray, but he didn't know what to pray to. Those religions that originated from the earth were undoubtedly ignorant in Kaylan's eyes. In the old era, those believers were even arguing about whether the earth was round or square, but now, humans have long been away from the Milky Way by countless light years. As for the true God mentioned by the Alpha planet, that is even less reliable. Let's not talk about whether it will protect heresies from the earth like ourselves. You must know that no devotee warrior with the so-called true God blood has been able to escape, not to mention that the thing underneath also has something from that bloodline. True God gene. I don't know what the true God worshipped by the Alpha planet is. Could it be that it is also a huge tentacle monster? I wonder if it tastes good when used to make grilled squid. At this moment, Kaylan suddenly heard a soft beep sound. The microsonar that had an unknown malfunction before returned to normal at this time. I haven't prayed yet, why did a miracle suddenly happen? However, half a second later, the half-smile on Kaylan's face froze. According to the image returned by the microsonar, there were 6 tentacles from the bottom of the abyss around Kaylan, and these tentacles were quietly moving. Silence has formed a cage with a diameter of more than 10 meters, trapping Kaylan in the middle. That thing discovered him from the beginning. As the Alpha star said, it seems to prefer playing with its prey. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 77. I'm sorry. He cursed in his heart, but Kaylan did not take any action. He knew that the more critical the moment, the less he could act rashly. He must not show any abnormality, otherwise, this cat and mouse game may end immediately. This place is still too far from the exit. Even if the power of the thruster is fully increased to the level of overload, he will not have a trace. There's only half a chance of getting out. There is only one chance, and you must take action when you are confident enough. During these 10 long minutes, the tentacles of the fusion body were always at peace with Kaylan, and Kaylan completely pretended not to notice these tentacles, but the distance between the two parties never widened, and Kaylan has always been within the attack range of these tentacles. Judging by the speed and time of surfacing, the exit of the abyss should be less than 100 meters above. This last 100 meters is the key to life and death. These tentacles will never let themselves swim out like this. At the last moment, they will definitely drag themselves into the abyss again, letting the prey suffer great despair when they think they are about to be safe. This is the evil of that monster. Taste. If the alpha man is not lying, this fusion dormant in the deepest part of the hatchery can probably be regarded as an intelligent creature. It seems that the biology textbook on the Ark needs to be revised and changed on a large scale. Apart from humans, the second intelligent creature existing on this planet, no matter from which point of view, it is not good news for humans. This is even more true for Kaylan. If the opponent is a beast that relies entirely on biological instinct to drive its actions, Kaylan's escape rate may be higher, but if it is an intelligent creature with sound thinking ability, the difficulty will be completely different. Kaylan did some calculations and found that if he turned the thrusters to the maximum without considering damage to the motor, he should be able to rush out a distance of about 20 meters in 2 to 3 seconds, compared with the speed of the fusion body. This was not enough. He had to at least increase his speed by more than 3 times before he could possibly break out of this cage composed of tentacles. We have to think of another way. The closer to the exit, the higher the possibility of the fusion body launching an attack, and Kaylan is not sure what that thing is thinking, but in other words, the closer to the exit, the greater the chance that he can break out of the abyss. This is a game where the risk and winning rate are increasing year on year, just like a card game called blackjack. If you want to win, you must make the points in your hand as close to blackjack as possible, but you cannot more than blackjack. Once it exceeds, it will be judged as burst and the bet will be lost directly. Just as Kaylan must get as close to the exit as possible without breaking through the bottom line of the fusion's desire to attack, he must seize that fleeting opportunity and put all his bets on it. Calm down, you must calm down. Kaylan kept saying to himself in his heart. The safety lock of the propeller has been released. He only needs to press the button, and the converter will inject the energy in the crystal into the motor at the maximum rate. Increase the blade speed to the limit. It's not yet time. Although the surroundings were still pitch black, Kaylan knew that less than 30 meters directly above him was the exit of the abyss. However, the distance is not enough. Moreover, the power of the propeller alone may not be able to increase the speed to that level. For the fusion body, the resistance of the water in the deep sea seems to be completely non-existent, and in just 1 second, its tentacles Kaylan can be caught. There are still the last 20 meters. Kaylan held his breath. Tentacles so close at hand might strike from the darkness at any time. By then, it would be too late. 19 meters, 18 meters. 15 meters. Kaylan felt like he was trudging through a minefield. Every meter he floated up was equivalent to taking a step forward. The further he walked, the closer he got to the safe zone, the more densely packed the mines became. But he couldn't stop, and he couldn't stop. 14 meters, 13 meters. That's enough, now. Kaylan pressed the button, and after a moment's pause, the paddles began to spin crazily at several times the speed, taking Kaylan straight towards the exit. The motor made an overwhelmed buzz. This level of overload would cause irreversible damage, but for now, it was at least enough to allow him to escape from here. The tentacles of the fusion body also moved, and they chased Kaylan at a faster speed. The front end of each tentacle split apart, and thousands of tentacles shot out like arrows. No. The speed is not enough. Almost in a breath, Kaylan realized that he would definitely be caught by the tentacles before rushing out of the abyss. The opponent's speed was too fast, even if all the propellers in his body were at full speed. There was no way he could get rid of it in its intact state. But Kaylan has one last trump card. He pulled the trigger, and the Vortex-I torpedo in the barrel was immediately launched, but the target of the torpedo was not the fusion tentacles below, but the exit above Ian's head. The moment the torpedo left the barrel, the metal claws on the hands of the deep-sea diving suit were firmly attached to it. The Vortex-I torpedo uses a jet-type crystal engine, and it only takes 0.06 to complete the acceleration process. In a second, Kaylan only felt a pull from the torpedo that was enough to tear his arms off. The next second, he had already rushed out of the abyss. Boom! A dull sound of collision came from behind. The tentacles of the fusion body had already broken open the metal net sealing the abyss, and they continued to pursue. The distance between the two sides was gradually getting closer. It would be troublesome if we chased him out. Kaylan originally thought that this fusion was trapped in the abyss hatchery, but now it seems that the hatchery is just a shelter for it. Perhaps it was because of the alienated larvae in the eggshells that the fusion body did not leave the nest, but if it was provoked, then everything would be hard to say. The jet engine consumes a lot of energy, and the crystallized energy built into the torpedo quickly bottomed out. Kaylan had to launch a second torpedo, but he still couldn't get rid of the tentacles that were chasing after him. This thing is too persistent. Kaylan hugged the torpedo with one hand and threw a series of special incendiary bombs backward with the other hand. A second later, a wall of fire several meters wide was behind him. It exploded and blocked those tentacles. Incendiary bombs are ineffective against the body of the fusion, but they still have a good effect on these derived tentacles. This has been confirmed under the abyss. The wall of fire bought Kaylan nearly 10 seconds. Following the light beam emitted by the searchlight, Kaylan had already seen the edge of the submarine plateau. Not even close. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 78. Finally, with the last bit of energy from the torpedo, Kaylan finally crossed the edge of the submarine plane. However, the fusion body did not stop there. The huge tentacles directly crossed the border and continued to catch up. All the thrusters on the deep diving suit have been scrapped, and Kaylan does not have a third vortex torpedo. Having lost all power, he has no choice but to escape and can only watch the tentacles of the fusion body getting closer and closer. The last trump card had been used, but he still couldn't escape the danger. It seems like it's really doomed this time. Kaylan looked up at the water above in despair and made his final decision. He let out all the air in the diving suit bladder. As the overall buoyancy dropped significantly, Kaylan quickly sank towards the deep sea. This was his only means of movement at present. Although this was a one-way ticket with no return, it was better than what he had now. Better to be dragged back to the hatchery by the tentacles. He would rather be crushed to death by the water pressure of the deep sea than become food for that monster. Along the edge of the submarine plane, Kaylan fell straight down. Looking at the cliff not far away, Kaylan felt as if he had jumped off a cliff. In the martial arts novels of the old era, the protagonist basically, you will not die if you jump off a cliff. Either you will be accepted as a disciple by an outsider master who lives under the cliff, or you will meet a girl who is beautiful but has a low IQ and likes to cheat. No matter how bad it is, at least you will not die. I can pick up a few Peerless secret books and the like. But the problem is, the cliffs where the protagonist jumps do not have water pressure, thousands of times atmospheric pressure below. There are no worldly masters, no stunning beauties, and no physical attack secrets. There is only despair and death. Still can't escape. The sinking speed is very fast, but compared to the tentacles of the fusion body, it is still much slower. The distance between the two sides is getting closer and closer. Kaylan can't wait until he is crushed to death by the water pressure, and he will be crushed by the tentacles. Captured. At this moment, many giant creatures appeared in Ian's field of vision. These creatures had spiral carapace with a diameter of more than 30 meters on their backs. With dozens of strong and powerful tentacles extending from the carapace, they cling to the cliffs outside the sea platform, forming an extremely spectacular sight. There are more than 100 individuals within the reach of the searchlight alone. There are so many giant nautiluses here. Although Kaylan saw this creature for the first time, it is not unfamiliar to humans. In the past 50 years, humans have sunk more than 100 ships in the Middle Sea, causing more than half of them to sink. The culprit of the incident is this giant cephalopod that looks like an enlarged nautilus. This kind of creature usually lives in waters 500 to 1000 meters deep, but sometimes goes to shallow sea areas to hunt. They are extremely ferocious in character and especially like to attack human ships. They will stick to the bottom of the ship and launch attacks unless the ship is brought together. Destroy them, otherwise most weapons will be useless against them. In human records, giant nautiluses often appear alone, but in this place, there is such a huge group of people living there. Even Kaylan couldn't help but exclaim. Perhaps because the target was too small, Kaylan did not attract the attention of the giant nautilus. Instead, the tentacles of the fusion that broke into their habitat alerted these creatures. They quickly gathered over and moved towards the fusion almost crazily. The tentacles attack. Is this okay? Kaylan watched in astonishment as these giant nautiluses rushed forward. Their tentacles were covered with barbed thorns. Every time they waved, they could tear off a large amount of the fusion body's tentacles. There were pieces of flesh and blood, and in the blink of an eye, black blood mist filled the sea water. These giant nautiluses actually got into trouble with the fusion body. It seems that my life should not be cut off. With a sigh in his heart, Kaylan quickly took out a few spare compressed gas bottles and put the valve and deep diving suit together. Airbag docking, as the gas was filled, his sinking momentum gradually stopped. Being attacked by the giant nautilus, the fusion body naturally couldn't help but fight back. A tentacle directly penetrated the shell of a giant nautilus, and with a strong tug, the body of the giant nautilus was directly removed from the shell. It was pulled out, and along with it, there were many broken internal organs. The crack at the front end of the fusion body's tentacle suddenly expanded several times, swallowing the entire body of the giant nautilus. In less than 5 seconds, the originally enlarged tentacle returned to its original shape, and on the surface of this tentacle, it grew many barbed thorns that were very similar to the giant nautilus. Swallow, digest, fuse the opponent's genes, mutate at a rapid rate. What kind of monster did the Alpha aliens create? Kaylan, who was watching the battle from the side, couldn't help but take a breath of air. But these giant nautiluses that are not afraid of death are not timid at all because of the death of their own kind. More giant nautiluses are gathering in the distance. In addition to tentacles, they also have hard and sharp beak-like mouth parts. Every attack can create shocking and terrifying wounds on the tentacles of the fusion body. A life and death fight between giant beasts in the deep sea. This scene is really rare. Kaylan shook his head with some pity. If the camera equipment was not available, otherwise, just filming this scene would be enough to kill him instantly. All monster science fiction films made by humans. As the battle continued, the tentacles of the fusion body gradually gained the upper hand. More than 15 giant nautiluses had been killed and devoured by it in a similar way. However, the number of giant nautiluses seemed endless, and these behemoths almost occupied the entire world. Throughout the entire cliff, the strong smell of blood in the sea water is constantly stimulating these violent carnivores. Kaylan began to swing his arm slowly, swimming in the opposite direction to the sea platform. There is no doubt that the final winner must be the fusion body dormant in the abyss. He must be killed in the giant Nautilus. Escape from here before the light comes, the further away the better. Judging from the current killing efficiency of the tentacles, these giant Nautiluses can at least drag K-Lan for several hours, but with K-Ian's current moving speed, it is still unknown whether he can swim to a safe zone in these few hours. Question. This submarine plateau itself is very suspicious. The Pioneer has been patrolling this area for at least a week, but all the detection equipment on the ship has not discovered the existence of the submarine plateau. This situation is really weird. K-Lan couldn't find a reasonable explanation at all, and he couldn't even be sure whether he was still in the original sea area. If so, wouldn't the Pioneer have always been within the attack range of the fusion body? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 79. If that's the case, it won't be the deep-sea giant eel's turn to besiege the Pioneer. The tentacles of the fusion body can extend all the way beyond the submarine plateau, so it is naturally easy to drag the icebreaker on the sea into the abyss. Could it be that this undersea city was covered by an insulating detection barrier, which resulted in the fusion body not attacking the icebreaker, and the people on the icebreaker not discovering this undersea city? This hypothesis is somewhat possible, but what? K-Lan suddenly felt that his feet were empty, and his whole body fell down again. What's going on? K-Lan subconsciously looked at the drainage airbag on his side. However, the appearance of the airbag was intact and there was no air leakage. But just a second ago, the balance between gravity and buoyancy was still there. But now, K-Lan is rapidly sinking into the deep sea. It's a liquid cliff, he suddenly reacted. This is a not very common natural phenomenon. In the ocean, due to the different salinity, water temperature and water pressure of seawater at different depths, as the depth increases, several layers of pycnoclines will appear in the vertical direction of the seawater. These seawaters are clearly layered and there will be almost no circulation and blending with each other, but in some places, the boundaries between these layers will appear and disappear, forming a buoyant fault like a cliff. In the old era, liquid cliffs could be said to be the number one killer of submarines, but since humans applied light-sensitive density meters to submarine operations, there have been very few submarines that accidentally entered the liquid cliffs, but the detection on K-Lan happened to be all the equipment failed, and it was impossible to defend against this liquid cliff that was impossible to detect with the naked eye. You must float up immediately, otherwise, if you exceed the critical depth, you will really be buried under the sea. K-Lan took out the compressed air bottle again, trying to inflate the drainage airbag to obtain greater buoyancy, but just as he was operating at that moment, the airtight valve of the drainage airbag suddenly burst, and the gas inside was immediately squeezed out by the huge water pressure, forming a long series of bubbles. Obviously, in the encounter with the fusion body, the damaged equipment was not just the propeller. First it was quickly sucked into the seabed by a huge force, and then all the gas in the airbag was released in just a few seconds. These actions will cause irreversible serious damage to the airtight valve. No matter how strong these parts are, they still have a tolerance limit after all. Today is really, misfortunes never come singly. Feeling the increasing pressure around him, K-Lan sighed with some regret. He has tried his best, but in this situation, only a miracle can save him. It seemed as if a pair of big hands were vigorously rubbing K-Ian's internal organs. His vision began to turn black, and his ears were filled with buzzing buzzes. The effect of the muscle-strengthening drug had ended, and that kind of mind-blowing, the unbearable pain reappeared, and a fishy sweet smell surged up from his throat. In addition, he could also feel some viscous liquid flowing out of his nostrils and ears. I'm so reluctant. He closed his eyes, but at this moment, he suddenly saw a strong white light. This light was as blazing as the sun, burning his eyes even through his eyelids, and there was only a perfect piece of pure white. How is it possible that there is a sun on the bottom of the sea? Kaylan tried his best to open his eyes, but he couldn't see anything except white. Is it a hallucination when I was about to die? He stretched out his hand, but he couldn't see his arm. It seemed that even his body was melted in the blazing light. What kind of thing is this? If it's an illusion, I hope to see an angel sister with long breasts and thighs, come and take me to heaven. Oh, I almost forgot, I am an atheist, there is no place for me in heaven. Gradually, Ian's consciousness began to blur. He could no longer feel the existence of his body, and even his thinking began to become a little stagnant. Why did you faint again? Hey, I'm still alive. When Kaylan regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was a pile of wet sand. Then, he found that he stood on a beach with his butt raised to the sky. Beach. Kaylan immediately wanted to jump up, but the bulky deep diving suit on his body restricted his movements. Not only did he fail to jump up, but he fell to one side, smashing a human figure out of the mud. Of shallow pits. What the hell is going on? Didn't I fall into the deep sea? Where is this? Just one movement of turning over almost used up all his strength. Behind him is a bare beach, nothing but sand soaked in seawater. A little further away, there is a long strip of exposed bedrock that has been eroded into strange shapes. Is this land, or an island? When Kaylan turned to look at the sea, the scene on the sea made him freeze in place. A city, a typical Alpha civilization city composed of countless towers, is standing on the sea in the distance. Moreover, in the sky above the city, countless aircraft that humans have never seen are flying back and forth. Channels constructed by holographic projections form a sophisticated and complex transportation network above the city. This is not a ruin, but a living Alpha civilization city. This is absolutely impossible, Kaylan gritted his teeth and said word by word. If such a city existed, it would have been discovered by humans long ago. Soon, he discovered something was wrong. As time went by, some buildings disappeared strangely, while some new buildings appeared silently at the other end of the city. So that's it? This is not a real city, but a mirage. As the clouds move and the light is disturbed, the city will undergo seemingly strange changes. The lower half of a tall tower is completely missing, the upper part is still suspended steadily in mid-air. What's more, the entire building has been turned upside down, making it look like it is in a time and space that is completely confused with its surroundings. The scene represented by this mirage is probably tens of thousands of years away from what it is now. There have also been mirages from ancient times on the Earth. Compared with this mirage, what Kaylan wants to know more at this moment is what happened to him after he fell into coma, and why he did not sink to the bottom of the sea, but appeared in this strange place. At that depth, you can only sink deeper and deeper. Even if you encounter an undercurrent, you will not be able to wash yourself to the surface. What's more, the nearest coast to the Pioneer icebreaker is hundreds of nautical miles away, even all the way. Even if the wind was favorable, he would have to float for more than 10 days before he could reach the shore. The deep diving suit is fully enclosed. In more than 10 days, all the oxygen generating agent has been used up. Kaylan has also been suffocated to death, but now, there is still about 3/3 of the oxygen generating agent left. 1. The time he spent unconscious could not exceed 8 hours at most. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 80. Kaylan initially planned to calculate how far he could drift in 8 hours, but it didn't take long for him to realize that this matter was completely meaningless. He didn't drift here in the normal way at all. According to normal calculations, he should not be stuck on this beach, but should be crushed into a meat pie thousands of meters deep under the sea. Not only was there something wrong with the undersea city, but there was something wrong with the entire sea area itself. Kaylan even wondered if he had mistakenly entered a micro-wormhole with a short-distance teleportation function before entering this area, but the technology to create artificial wormholes has never appeared in the various ruins of Alpha civilization, let alone humans. Although mankind was forced to make a space jump during the 900-year voyage of Noah's Ark, that jump relied on a natural wormhole that had existed in the universe for hundreds of millions of years, and after the jump was completed after that, less than 1/10 of the people survived, and the entire Ark was severely damaged. It took nearly 100 years to recover. Theoretically speaking, artificial wormholes are far less stable than natural wormholes. Kaylan once read several related papers out of boredom. The author of the paper believes that even if humans have this technology in the future, the worms created will the hole can only exist for a very short time. In the words of the original author, it is about 10 to 20 femtoseconds, and 1 femtosecond is only 1/400,000th of a second. The reason why it can only exist for such a short time is because the energy required to maintain an artificial wormhole is an extremely terrifying number. Assuming that there is an artificial wormhole created by Alpha civilization in the sea, let's not mention how long Alpha civilization has disappeared. Even if it is only 1 year, the energy used to maintain this artificial wormhole in this year is enough to drain the entire star system where Alpha Star is located. It might not even be enough. Besides wormholes, there seems to be no other way for a living person like me to teleport to another place instantly without consciousness, right? Kaylan thought hard for several minutes, and finally gave up. Well, even professionals can't explain this kind of problem clearly, let alone a layman like him. If this was the plot of a science fiction novel, perhaps he could use the excuse of indecision, quantum mechanics to excuse it. But the problem is that this thing really happened to him. He can fool others, but you can't lie to yourself, right? At least you're alive, it's better than dead, Kaylan comforted himself. It took Kaylan nearly 20 minutes to take off the armor-like deep diving suit. However, as soon as he came into contact with the outside environment, his skin felt bursts of tingling pain. This is not good news. The radiation concentration in this area is very high, which is fatal for Kaylan, who does not have spare protective clothing. Fortunately, there are anti-radiation pills in the emergency backpack. Kaylan found the small bottle marked anti-radiation NIN, poured out 2 small pills from it, raised his head and swallowed it. This is the smallest medicine bottle with only 36 medicines in it. If he takes 2 pills every 4 hours and then increases the dosage by 2 pills every 4 hours, this amount is not enough for him to take 24 pills. Hours. We have to figure out where this place is, and we also have to find a way to get in touch with the Pioneer. Kaylan glanced around, and then walked towards the coastal bedrock not far away. This rocky belt is more than 10 kilometers away and almost surrounds the entire coast. The top of the bedrock is almost 100 meters above the sea level. Kaylan found a gentle slope and climbed up on his hands and knees. There was no soil on it, and there was no vegetation cover, it was all bare rocks. Although it looks very desolate, without any signs of biological activity, it also means safety. On Alpha Planet, the indigenous creatures themselves are synonymous with danger and threats. As long as the problem of temperature saturation and radiation can be solved, Kaylan's life will not be in danger for the time being. Standing on the top of the bedrock and looking towards the sea, the mirage in the distance presented a completely different scene from before. The towers were shaking violently, there were burning fires everywhere, and a strange black mist shrouded them. The entire city was covered, and the aircraft in the sky fell like dumplings. After a while, those high towers began to sink one by one. The originally prosperous city was fragmented, the transportation network built in the mid-air was torn apart, and the scope of the black fog is constantly expanding on the sea. This mirage, could it be the ruins of the undersea city? Kaylan was shocked. The ruins of the undersea city he was referring to were not the buildings built on the undersea plateau, but the pioneers. The original target point of the ruins No. -094. Is this an image record of recreating the city that sank to the bottom of the sea? Kaylan took out the camera from his backpack and clicked the power button with the intention of giving it a try. As a burst of pixel snowflakes flashed across the screen, the camera actually started. Is it because he left that sea area? Kaylan glanced at the locator and communication device on his body, but unfortunately, these electronic devices were still in a faulty state, and he did not have the corresponding maintenance tools at hand. Hey, at least take a photo of this mirage first. This image should be able to sell for an astronomical number. Kaylan pointed the camera at the sea, but to his shock, nothing appeared on the camera screen. Picture of mirage. There was only a calm sea, no black fog, no fire, and no tall tower sinking into the sea. What's going on? He glanced through the optical viewfinder. Black fog, fire, destroyed cities, but when he moved his eyes to the screen, there was nothing. He stood there stunned for a few seconds, then turned around numbly, took out the mirror, and pointed it at the sea behind him. The sea surface on the mirror was empty, no different from the camera screen. In other words, this mirage can only be seen by Ian's eyes. No, to be precise, it's not that he is the only one who can see mirages, but these scenes are originally recorded in his mind. Only when he casts his sight on the sea, these scenes will appear in front of his eyes. This is not a mirage at all. If I had to use one word to describe it, retinal projection would be more appropriate. First it was text, audio, and now even images and videos are coming out. Kaylan stretched out his hand and rubbed his temples vigorously. That damn stone tablet, it was stuffed into my brain. What kind of things?